This is a pile of Intel Express enterprise networking equipment from the late 90s. As you can see on the front plate, they advertise themselves as stackable. We've got 2 hubs up top and 3 switches down below. Stackable means we can interconnect more than one physical unit with very hard to find cables and treat multiple units as one logical unit managed with something called the Intel device view. So in this case, we'll be able to combine these 2 hubs into one as a stack, and more interesting is combining the 3 switches into a stack with different but equally hard to come by cables. This Express gear was sold at a really competitive price point. The main goal being to let a small to medium business get fast Ethernet or 100 megabit Ethernet into their business as fast and as cheaply as possible with really low management overhead. This gear wasn't top of the line or fancy by any means, but the Intel device view would have made it really easy for a junior system admin to manage a pretty large network with this stuff. What's very fascinating for the price point and use case were these modules. So Intel's whole game was get these into your system, get fast Ethernet, and then when you're ready, you can upgrade to Gigabit Ethernet via the modularity, and I'm lucky enough to have found one of these Gigabit modules on eBay. So we're going to start with these hubs. It's fascinating that a hub even has modularity to begin with. That's novel in and of itself. And then we'll see if we can't get these switches stacked up as one logical unit with a 6-port matrix module. Let's get into it. These are Intel Express 220T hubs. I think they came out in 1998. This one on the bottom here was actually very generously donated by a viewer named Steven, along with one of those other switches you saw. And in fact, that's actually how I found out about this Intel gear in the first place. So I know this one on the bottom works, and you'll notice it doesn't have the module bays. So I hunted this one down on eBay, and it's got 2 slots. It's got this very cool management module in the first one with a serial console port. Management means I can actually, remotely interface with this thing and see what its stats are. And then over here, we've got an interesting one, the Ethernet module. Now, I'm assuming this lets me get the switch, the managed switch, on my network so that Intel device view UI I was showing you can see it. You cannot use that UI to manage a plain old simple hub like this without these modules. What's confusing me though is there is no mention of this Ethernet module as being required for management, but I don't quite understand how this thing alone would be able to get it on the network. Anyway, we'll be experimenting with that. And a very quick note about hubs in general. A hub is just a dumb physical interconnect. So when traffic comes in on this port, it blasts it all out to all the other connected ports, and the device in question that it belongs to is responsible for, actually picking that up. A switch, on the other hand, is smarter. If I've got a computer connected on port 1 and another one on port 7, if this computer wants to send traffic to this computer, the switch is smart. So as it flows in, it's only going to flow out of number 7 to the right destination. It's not going to bother these other ports. It's more efficient. But that obviously, back in the 90s, was more expensive. So hubs were pretty common in the 90s, and they were basically eclipsed by switches in the early 2000s as that got more affordable and the demands on the network were higher. But 1990s price point is of no concern to us. The name of the game today is stacking. I've got the cables I need. I only need 1, but I have 5. It was cheaper to buy a 5-pack on eBay, and good excuse to buy more hubs. If you're curious, these are a stacking cascade cable for these exact hubs, 12 and 24 port, which is good. That's what I've got. And they were manufactured in 1998. Let me flip these around and show you how you stack them. On the back, you can see we have those big connectors for these cables, and you can cascade them, like the diagram is trying to say, up to 8 tall. It numbers them based on the cables, so our number 1 is going to be on the top, and we'll do something like this, and we'll be able to stack these and interconnect them physically. But first, I'd like to assess the physical condition of this guy. I think we're going to open it up. The pictures on eBay had it on, but it wasn't sold as working, and there's a couple suspicious aspects. Number 1, it smells like a auto mechanic repair shop, which is not what you want your stuff to smell like when you buy it on eBay. It has its rubber feet installed. These actually came with the units. You can see them in the instruction manual. But this tells me this was not in a clean data center racked up. It was sitting on a shelf somewhere, probably an auto shop. We'll start off by getting each of these modules out. They have these captive thumb screws, but I've found that they usually tighten too tight for you to undo by hand again. So you gotta kick them off with a screwdriver. Okay. Hopefully this thing is not all gunked up. That's not too bad. I can live with that. There we go. Got a nice Intel i960 chip on there. Interesting. I'm already sort of relieved by that. That board didn't look bad at all. Just a little dust. This one's a little dustier. Some sort of EEPROM on there with a version for the firmware, v1.01, I guess. These are very serviceable machines, and they're quite tough. The case is metal with a really nice matte black paint. In a previous video, I cleaned off the two I had originally got, and they came to life just fine. Okay, how bad's it gonna be? Oh, nothing. An acceptable amount of dust given this thing's age. Yeah, that's not bad. I'm gonna blow this off with the air compressor, and I will be back. While I'm doing that, if you're curious about the overall history of these switches and want to hear it right from someone that was there and a guy that sat next to the people that were working on the Intel device view that we're going to look at today, I was fortunate enough to interview Doug Boom, who is an Ethernet expert. Doug, to this day, is a principal engineer working on Ethernet at Intel. I'll link to that video down in the description. It was really great getting to talk to him and behind the scenes type info. If you're interested in this Intel stuff, highly recommend checking that out. Well, that didn't really do much. This dust was on here a little better than I thought. I tried to knock off the big stuff with a paintbrush and hit it with the air gun, but didn't really do much. I'm happy enough though. Based on the smell, I'm really happy with how this looks inside. And the fact that this dust is actually kind of hard to get off kind of confirms my auto shop theory. A little more grimier than I expected, but this is definitely clean enough to fire up. I'm confident it will not burn down. And if you're disappointed with that lack of air gun action, go ahead and check out a previous video where I cleaned up the other hub we're stacking today. Now I kind of go on and on about how I like this design. It's serviceable, but there is a flaw. So when you're pushing these modules in, look how much flex is happening back here. The whole subassembly is moving around. And basically what can happen is they don't seat all the way, even though, see how I had to press that manually myself? They won't seat all the way and you think the card's broken, and really what you have to do is come in here and just push them together. Now it seems like in this unit, they've tried to mitigate that with these rubber feet. So presumably when the case is on here, there's some friction there making that connect a little better. But yeah, kind of a bummer about these. Easy enough to deal with though. Got it plugged in. Let's go ahead and fire this thing up and see if it comes to life. There's no switch on the back, so I'm using this switch here. It says initializing self-test RAM, that's good. Does a bunch of self-tests as it starts up, including its ribs, apparently. So it asks you to set an IP, and you get in here, say manual, and you just have to roll through like this to set it manually. We're not going to do that. I'm going to see if you can set it over the serial console. That would make a lot of sense. And then if we back out here and we go to stats, you can go take a look at port stats on individual ports and see it's asking for a hub number. And if I try to roll through, it only knows about hub 1. That's this guy. So I think it's ready to stack. I think if we plug the stack cable in, it'll see hub number 2 down here. Let's try that before we do the serial port just to see how it goes. All right, these can only go one way, of course. Out of the factory, it's happy to be put right here. These are super industrial. But this natural flow that it wants to take isn't right. You have to wrench it upside down against the natural flow of the cable. And this cable's really thick and heavy duty. It really seems like overkill. But let's get them cascaded. So it wants the top one in the upper right, and then you cascade them down like that. All right, check this out. These things have managed LED indicators, and the second one knows it's managed and they're blinking at the same time. They're talking to each other. I haven't done anything except for plug that cable in. All right, let's cancel out of the IP address deal. Stats. Yeah, look at that. I can select hub number 2 now. We're stacking. Now, serial console. Let's start there. Got my little USB to serial cable with a null modem on there. Let's see if we can talk to this thing. I am dying to see this thing in the Intel device view, but we'll start with the basics. So here's a putty comm window. Press enter. It's kind of working. Oh, password protected. Oh, it's asking me for a password. I don't think we're seeing the right thing here. We're missing some info. Oh boy. It's got a reset button. Let's look into that. I actually just rebooted it, and it is saying it's self-test. Yeah, okay. So I was on 9600 baud. It actually spits that out right when it starts up and everything was fine. So let's look. This thing clearly has been set with a username and password because it doesn't like that. Admin. Okay, I'm gonna do a little research and we'll figure out how to factory reset this thing. Not a lot of information about these online other than the fact that they exist. It does have this reset switch right here. The way you reset the switches is you just hold it in for a while and then the thing will gives some visual indication that it's resetting. So I'm going to hope that's what's happening here. Whoa. Oh, that was just like a hard reset. I don't know if that's a factory reset. We'll find out, I guess. Yeah, like all these lights reset when I did that. So I don't know if that's going to do what I need. It did not. So by default, it should have no user, no pass. I was hoping inside the config menu there'd be something, but you just have set IP, sleep, whatever that is, ports, and then of course you can set the baud rate. Let me pull the card out. Maybe there's something physical on it. When you power off the management hub, all these just go orange and the manage light turns off. The children of the management hub don't like that. No physical reset on this other than the one here. I guess I could try holding it in for a while. Anyway, that was a long shot. I was thinking about it a little bit more. And the way this works is once I assign this IP, there's supposed to be a web management interface. And of course, this just connects probably to the hub, as a computer. So I think this Ethernet module is for a different purpose. It's not actually for management. Probably won't even mess with it. Yeah, holding in this reset switch, for an extended period of time does nothing, just resets it. So I'm gonna give this thing an IP and I'll be back in like 30 years. It's not so bad. If you hold it, it really starts speeding up. Check that out. All right, 20 years. This is what reset is for, by the way. I just put in an IP gateway subnet and you press reset to get it to start using that, I guess. Yeah, now it's up and it's not asking for an IP, so I think that is saved. This machine is on the same network, so let's try to hit the IP I just gave it. Not looking promising. It would help if it actually was on the network. Physically, We'll see what we get. That didn't get us very far. It's asking for the username and password Intel Embedded Web at VX Humvee. Humvee used to own this thing? I don't know. That would make sense. Auto repair shop. Maybe it was a repair shop for Humvees. Who knows? How do you reset the thing? Well, let's fire up old Intel device view and see if we can't take over. See here, it knows that this is well, I guess this is all I really wanted anyway. Look at this. Yes. This device view stuff is so cool. Okay, so I can't even click this thing or do anything with it. It certainly knows there's a stack. Oh, check this out. This is pretty typical of the Intel device view world. This is on the archive, by the way. A lot of people helped me find this piece of software and I archived it. I'll leave a link in the description. It's very hard to find. Look at this, restore factory settings. And it's probably gonna lose my IP. Yes. Lots of thought with the device view. It says, before resetting it, set your IP address again so that you don't lose it. So it's leaving the IP address so I can still talk to it. IP configuration. Very nice. I can do it all right here. Interesting that they chose boxes that are too small for 3 digits. Bold design choice from Intel. This is fancy, dude. It's rebooting the device right now. The serial console said it was rebooting. Are we in? Ha, we're in. Okay. So the trick, of course, as anything with this Express stuff, is to have a copy of Intel Device View. It's persisted the IP. Okay, I'm calling these hubs stacked and managed. Let's move on to the switches. Here are 3 Intel 510T Express switches. This one at the bottom was the one that was originally donated to the channel along with one of those hubs, and that's how I found out about all this gear. So thank you, Steven. And then I started picking these up on eBay because I wanted to stack them, like we're doing in this video. And it's pretty much the same story, except instead of having built-in stack interfaces, you have to buy these stack modules. Some of these stack modules have just the single port here, and they have this kind of interesting, pretty dense connector here. You ever wonder where the stupid gunk on my bench comes from? It's these stupid Intel switches. Anyway, the port is a little more dense, but the cables are no less industrial and impressive than the hub connects. 2 of these were generously donated by a viewer and patron named John, all the way from the UK, so that is awesome. And then I picked up a 3rd one on eBay. My initial thinking had been, well, I'll just create little, 2 switch stacks like this. I'll just interconnect 2 of them and be good to go. And it turns out that works, but it only acts as an Ethernet link between the 2. It doesn't actually stack them in the UI. Let me show you. We're going to do a little reconfiguration. I've never actually turned this top unit on. We'll do that together once we get our stack config going. So let me swap this out. Not a whole lot to these stack modules. It says stack interface module, SIM. No doubt they were referred to as SIMs internally. Nothing on the back either. So this is clearly some sort of like Ethernet interconnect to the main board? I'm not sure. Most of it is just traces. Get this guy swapped out. This is a 100 FX fiber module, basically two 100 megabit ports over fiber. So I'm going to slide this down here in its new permanent home as part of this switch I know works. All right, thanks for dealing with my housekeeping there. So here's our setup. I know both of these switches turn on and function. I've got the stack interface module down here, which is specifically meant for stacking these together. Got this very interesting 1 gigabit module. So it has a stack interface module on the right, and then it's got a 1000 SX fiber port. Hopefully we'll have time to try that later in the video. And it is grouped together with another of the same form factor of these stack interface modules. So that's what's making me think there's just Ethernet going over these guys. I haven't looked much, but I'm not sure if you could just get a 1 gig module that was this form factor and you'd throw that in a router for interconnect. I'm not sure. Interesting nonetheless. So this had been my sort of naive assumption that I could just stack two of them with the correct ports. And notice this one from eBay, I'm pretty sure I didn't mess with this, had another stack interface module. So I had assumed, okay, yeah, I can daisy chain these things if I really want to. Not the case, as we'll see. Let's fire these up and take a look in the device view. Fun Intel Express fact of the day for you. Some iterations have a power button on the back, and some don't. Both of those are powered up. This 192.168.88 subnet is the default these things factory reset themselves to, so I've just been rolling with that for simplicity. This is the unit on the bottom with the single stack interface module. We can see it's green, it knows it's connected. No errors detected from the device. If we go look at the other one, it's got its modules. It knows that I'm connected to the right port there, green little indicator, but we've got an error down here. And it says back-to-back connection in redundant or stack setup not allowed. The solution is to make a stack connection or remove the other module. So I really had to sit down and think about this for a while. And finally, I just did what it said, or what I thought it was telling me to do. Remove the other module, which I think is this one on the right. So I've gone ahead and removed that other module. And now that I've rebooted, it says no errors, everything's fine. These two switches are happily interconnected through the stack module. Notice that only the switch on the bottom is on the network, yet here in the device view, we can talk to the top one just fine and interact with it and connect it. So that must be some sort of Ethernet connectivity link, but we're not stacked. So the hub clearly was stacked in this UI. There's supposed to be special UI that lets you manage the stack as a whole. We're not stacked. Unacceptable. So this got me reading the documentation. And then there's all these mentions of a matrix module. And it turns out the matrix module is required to stack. And let me tell you, not a lot of these matrix modules out there in the world. I paid 50 bucks for this on eBay, and I'm not proud of it. Pretty sketchy listing too. There was no shot of the front. It kind of looked like maybe it was a 3-port deal, even though I'd only ever read about 6 ports. So I was very relieved to get this and see that there were 6 ports, and it was the right one. So now let's start getting this thing into its final form. Going to put the matrix module in this switch I don't know works. That'll be interesting. I've got a spare one now, so of course I'll have to buy more of these. Guess I'll put this down here because I don't have enough blanking plates, and as you saw, it doesn't like it when you have more than one of these in a machine. This one will host the matrix module, which looks awesome if I am being honest. Okay, I don't know anything about this one. Never powered it up, so let's see if we can't talk to it over the console before we get it all connected to the real network here. Seems to be starting up okay. Sounds all right. Console has come to life. Let's see if we can log in. It's got an IP set on it. See if we can just log in with no password. No. All right. That's fine. So there is a factory reset path that you can follow. You do the reset switch and you run some commands here. As I recall, to factory reset these, with it powered on, you hold this reset button, which will get into something called maintenance mode on the console and let us reset it. So I think we're going to hold this in until the status light blinks. There we go, that's good. Now, if you connect to the stereo console, you get this maintenance prompt. We're in maintenance mode. And we can do something called run defparm, default parameters. And as I recall, it just goes for it. No confirmation. Yeah. It's just cranking away, resetting the router. I guess it's kind of hard to type. It's not like you'd mess that up. All right, just a few seconds later, press key to enter local management. The IP has been reset. I misremembered that. That 192.168.88. I think one of these switches came with that, and I just kept it. So we'll have to change to that. Anyway, we should be able to go to Administrator, no pass. Here we are. So let's give this thing an IP address. Basic setup. Yeah, there we go. Give it that gateway for future use. This is the matrix host. I don't know. No password. And we're done. Here's the cable setup. I don't know what they were thinking with these really thick cables. Like, this must have got out of hand in a data center that had full stacks of these really quick. Obviously, you can take this unit and add 6 of them to it for a total of 7. This would have just been tons of cabling going on in the front of the cage, and these aren't exactly, you can't really tighten these up. Anyway, let's fire it on. All 3 are on. They're connected like you saw. We can see it's talking about stack management. And maybe this came up before I factory reset that thing, because here's its old IP. I don't know, let's just go for it. And I'm going to say I want to configure the addresses. What does this mean? Synchronize. Oh, get them on the same subnet maybe? What's consecutive do? Sure. Yes. Oh, man. Oh, we're so stacked. This is even better than I could have ever hoped for. It's very confused. It's having trouble with these. All this, and is the software just not going to work? Oh, look at that. You can select the whole stack to configure. Give it a name, you know? Okay, we might have some resetting to do. It is sort of confused. I see the problem. My IP that I changed didn't really stick. In fact, I can no longer log in. I think I didn't persist my settings after I reset it. I'm going to do that whole thing again. That might have been confusing. To recap, I just reset this top one. We did that together. And I don't think I chose save to flash memory after I set it. So when I turned it off and I reconfigured the stack and turned it all back on, it had gone back to needing a password, wrong IP, etc. So let's save this out this time, and let's see if that gets us any further. Just for good measure, restart Intel device view. Sees all the devices individually. That's good. Haha. And it wants me to manage them as a stack. I'm just going to let it leave all the IP addresses I've manually assigned. Say stack management. They need to be synchronized. Now, here's where you're actually getting the benefit of a stack. You can choose which one you'd like to use its configuration for. So I'm going to let the matrix host be the one that just configures everything. It's going to go off and do all that. This is really cool. It's done. Let's save. It's going to do all that. Oh yeah, look at this. This is so cool. So I named this one Matrix Host. I really like that it has all this information on the right-hand pane. The IP at a glance, because mine are out of order physically from how I've stacked them, so I'm sure that was common. This is incredible. Imagine seeing 7 of these. Uh-oh. Yeah. Collab stack. Oh, that's too bad it doesn't show it right there. Oh, this one has some old settings. It was the CI switch 2 from the 4th floor, apparently. Stacked. We're stacked. I don't know what to say. I've been thinking about this for like weeks. Well, we're not done yet. Get the hubs in here. Oh yeah. You gotta bring hubs and switches together with a crossover cable, which I have right here. Obviously, we want to turn them on all at the same time. Yeah, those blue chonkers really kind of ruin the aesthetic, because these are otherwise very aesthetically pleasing. All right, party time. Whole Intel stack. Look at it go. It's beautiful. I'm not gonna lie, it's getting kind of dusty in here with this stack running. Throat's getting kind of scratchy. Man, so cool. I love seeing these stacked up. It unfortunately makes me want more of them for no reason. I'm obviously not doing anything with these things. Looks like you can reboot the whole stack. Of course, you can edit basic configuration about the whole thing. We got stack set up. Let's see here. IPs of the switches. Link aggregation settings. Spanning tree settings. All sorts of stuff. Monitoring. You can monitor the stack as a whole. In fact, let's go look at the stack health monitor. That one's not particularly useful. Intra-stack traffic. Oh, here we go. The stacks are doing nothing. We'll do something about that in a minute. This is one way to represent traffic, I suppose. Cool. How many packets each guy's sending. And then, of course, we've got our little independent hub stack here, though it is connected to our network through our stack of switches. This is excellent. It's kind of odd. Every time you go back to one of the switches, it asks you if you want to manage the single device or go to stack. If you go stack, it just hops you right back into the stack UI. Just wanted to show that. It's kind of jarring. Let's talk about this 1 gigabit module. Let me get this crap all out of the way. So one of the selling points for this series was that Intel, when they were done with it, would sell you one of these gigabit modules for the very low price of thousands of dollars. Up to this point, we've been connecting the whole stack with this measly 100 megabit connection. We're done with that. Well, let's try to get 1 gig fiber as the backbone uplink for this whole stack. Very quick aside about bits and bytes. So when I'm talking about this network gear, I pretty casually throw out 10 megabit, 100 megabit, and I'll call these things a 10-100 machine or unit. And now I'm talking about 1 gigabit or 1000 megabit. For whatever reason, when we talk about network speeds, there's probably a good reason, we use bits. But if you're a mere mortal like me, you probably think in terms of megabytes. A bit is the foundational construct for all modern architectures, and a bit is just a 0 or a 1. And it turns out you can represent a lot of stuff with zeros or ones, because it's like a switch. A light switch is either on or off, 0 or 1. Most modern architectures work on bytes. A byte is 8 bits, and you can store a lot of numbers in 1 byte using 8 bits. Anyway, don't worry about that. The point is, there are 8 bits in a byte. So if you want to know how fast a 10 megabit port is, you divide it by 8, 1.2 megabytes. If you want to know how fast a 100 megabit port is, you divide it by 8, 12.5 megabytes. And this guy here, the gigabit link, you divide it by 8, 1000 divided by 8 is about 125 megabytes. I'm not sure why the networking world uses bits, but I kind of have a conspiracy theory that internet service provider marketers use bits just so they can put a bigger number in front of you. It's not 12 megabytes per second, it's 100 megabit. 100 is bigger than 12.5, right? Pretty sure that's why they do that. Sometimes it'll even be like a gigabit link and they'll call it 1000 megabits or what, anyway. That's what we're all talking about when we're using bits instead of bytes. Just remember, 8 bits in a byte, divided by 8, you have megabytes. Probably easier to reason about when you're thinking about speeds on your computer. Now, the idea here is to get a 1 gig uplink to this whole stack. Of course, each of these ports can't actually operate at that full speed, but in aggregate, I think you could see how it would be desirable to have as fast of an uplink as possible to this whole stack. I'll let you do the math on how many of these can run at full tilt until we saturate this 1 gig. And the only way to get gig to this is over fiber. So that's what we're going to try to do. I need to get a router in this situation that has a 1 gig uplink, and I think you know we're using one of these bad boys. The iconic Cisco 7200 series VXR. This one doesn't have a lot going on the front. Let me flip it around for you. On the back, it's got what are called network processing engines, or NPE. This is a G1, so it's got 3 1 gig links. You can either use RJ45, what you're probably used to, or these GBIC or GBIC slots. And I just so happen to have one of these 1000 SX GBICs that I'm hoping is compatible, given that they both say 1000 base SX. I've never actually used fiber, believe it or not, but the dream here is that we can get a 1 gig link going between this thing and that thing, and then we'll plug one of these in to my real network, get it on the internet. This will act as our router, and we'll be cruising. Here's our setup, going into my network, going into the stack. The stack is off for now. I'll get this configured first, and then console port to configure it over. So let's rip this up. She's up. This is the console of the 7200 router. And if you remember, we have the 2 interfaces we care about. The first one we need to get on my network. The second one we need to get on that 192.168.88 network that the stack is using. So let's configure the first one. We'll get it on my home network. Bring it up. That's good. And for the second one, we will configure it as 192.168.88.1. If you'll recall, I was being a little sneaky and I was using that as the gateway for all the switches because I thought I might end up doing this. Wasn't sure though. Bring that up as well, even though the stack isn't connected. To summarize, the first one is on my home network. The second one is on the stack network and will act as its gateway. Well, this is quickly becoming a failure. I cannot get the link lights to illuminate on this fiber connection. Fiber is so complicated, which is why I've been avoiding it up to this point. This multi-mode cable doesn't work. This is an OM3 multi-mode cable. This is a single mode cable. That doesn't work. Fiber has a transmit and receive side. And in these, crossover cables I've got, A here goes to B and B goes to A, and you get the idea. You need to cross, receive, and transmit. And just to prove that to myself, even though I could follow the cable on these short ones, I even broke the housing and crossed them, and either way it doesn't work. And I've got plenty of these Gigabit modules. Most of them are the SX I need. I've tried a ton. Got a couple that are rated for longer wires and higher transmission, but those don't work either. I have no idea if they negotiate downwards anyway. So yeah, might not get as far as I wanted to in this video. I do like seeing all this stuff roaring together though. My best guess is that these multi-mode fiber cables I have are not quite right for this older 1000 SX gear. These are the exact ones I'm using. I'll put that there because I'm sure within moments of watching this, someone will tell me exactly what's wrong here. I'm not going to get the Gigabit module working today, but I think that's okay. I wasn't actually going to do anything useful with it anyway. I mean, I was going to hook up like one computer and do a speed test, and the result was going to be about 100 megabit because that's all these ports can do anyway. So that got me thinking about future projects. I want to set up a rig where I can plug in multiple NICs, coming off a Raspberry Pi or some other computer, and saturate and send as much traffic through these switches as possible, and other switches in the future. And then we can monitor the stack with the Intel device view and actually see, how this thing is doing and if we can raise the temperature and all that and kind of exercise the thing. And clearly I don't know anything about fiber. It's very complicated. Like I was saying, I've been putting it off this whole time. I was hoping this would be like an easy slam dunk. I thought I had everything I needed, but clearly I don't. It is possible that this thing's just broken, but I kind of doubt that. This stuff hardly ever breaks. But there is no denying we're stacked physically and logically. So that's what I really wanted to do in this video. I've been really thinking about getting these interconnects going both on the hubs and the switches. So I'm glad that actually went relatively smoothly once I had all the right hardware. I hope you enjoyed following along as I figured out this Intel stack stuff. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I've got more videos on the way. And if you'd really like to support the channel and help me continue to corner the Intel Express switch market, I'm on Patreon. I post behind the scenes type videos, sometimes an early release, and generally what I'm thinking about and what's coming up next. Thank you so much for watching. Hope I see you in the next one.